a major step forward in curbing the violence in Fort Myers.
Something has happened on all of the streets out here.
Potentially derailed because of the officers involved in the criminal cases.
The NBC2 investigators uncovered several Fort Myers police officers placed on leave after a scathing report on the department are potential witnesses in the Lake Boys cases.
The arrest of those 23 documented gang members was one of the biggest crackdowns on crime by the department in the last decade. New at 6, NBC2 investigator David Hodges is questioning what it means for those cases.
Well, I've confirmed at least 3 officers put on leave after the release of this free report are connected to these Lake Boys cases. I spent days uncovering exactly how they're involved. It was the peak of the violence problem in Fort Myers, September 23rd, 2015. One night, 7 people shot, 2 of them in Harlem Lakes on Davis Court, what FMPD calls the headquarters of a gang called the Lake Boys.
To hear a gunshot, that's nothing new.
Barbara Williams used to live in Harlem Lakes. Her mom still does, just 2 blocks off Davis Court.
I don't want my mom to die by a bullet that was not even meant for her. I know something needs to be done because it's gotten real bad.
City leaders demanded an end to the violence.
I'm reaching out to the most sophisticated advisors in law enforcement.
Talk need to cease and actions need to be taken.
And that is where the case began, and it's all laid out right here. NBC2 got a hold of a deposition between attorneys for the Lake Boys and the lead detective for the case for FMPD, Detective Wolfgang Daniel. Under oath, he said that in December of 2015, then Acting Chief Dennis Eads requested we do something about the gang problem. They decided to focus on the Lake Boys gang because they were the most notorious in the community. In January 2016, they discussed doing small drug buys or doing a large investigation. Daniel says eventually we were told that if we can do a long-term investigation, to do one. After a year of gathering social media, surveillance, and compiling criminal histories, in January, FMPD arrested 23 alleged members of the Lake Boys. The state attorney's office filed racketeering charges. Williams says while all the crime hasn't stopped, it has made a difference.
Some days it's quiet like this. Now tonight might be a whole nother story.
The story for FMPD was far from over. 1 month after the arrest, 5 officers were put on leave after allegations in an audit called the Free Report detailed corruption and a toxic culture. For the first time, NBC2 has identified 3 of those officers are listed as having information relevant to the Lake Boys case. Sergeant Michael Forbes, Officer Jason Jackson, and Sergeant Richard Notaro. Attorney Jerry Olivo represents Jonathan Griffin, one of the alleged Lake Boys suspects.
Some of these officers may have played a greater role in an individual co-defendant's case, more so than perhaps another co-defendant.
Sergeant Richard Notaro appears to have been the most influential. According to the lead investigator, Notaro oversaw the unit the whole time, told the unit to do the long-term investigation, decided they would not contact FDLE for assistance, reviewed social media of the Lake Boys, and has conducted previous investigations into the Lake Boys that were less successful.
You have to look at first the nature of their misconduct to see if it has any appreciable effect on the investigation or the case.
In my opinion, I think all the officers are credible. I don't know that it would impact.
Attorney Robert Barant represents 4 of the officers on leave. He says they don't know the allegations against them, but they maintain they've done nothing wrong. He says putting these officers on leave during the Lake Boys case could backfire.
I don't think this was a very good move on the part of the city in the middle of this investigation. I don't think anybody thought it through.
In a statement, Fort Myers Police Lieutenant Jay Rodriguez says the Fort Myers Police Department stands by the case and the peace it has brought the Harlem Lakes community. FMPD still refuses to discuss why these 5 officers were placed on leave. For the NBC2 investigators, I'm David Hodges.
Call, email, or download the NBC2 News app and submit your tip now.
A meeting between the Lee County NAACP and the Fort Myers Police Department was canceled just minutes before it was supposed to start.
They were set to talk about improving community relations following a scathing independent audit that alleged serious corruption within the department. NBC2's Levi Ismail is live from police headquarters to explain why this meeting didn't happen today.
Now, I was here just outside police headquarters when the members of the NAACP showed up just about 10 minutes before their meeting. That's when a police officer came out and told them it's not happening today. They turned back, and then the police officer began telling them, turn back and come back next Monday. One by one, they opened the door, only to be turned back. NAACP members gathered outside Fort Myers Police in shock. A meeting scheduled for Monday between police, the state attorney's office, and the NAACP was canceled just 10 minutes before it began. Officers say there was a conflict with Chief Derek Diggs' schedule, but they couldn't notify anyone of the changes in time.
Everybody wants and needs to communicate more often and more clear.
Mayor Randy Henderson, one of many criticized for not putting an end to the police corruption sooner, spoke with us before the meeting was supposed to happen and said this meeting was long overdue.
I believe we were able to demonstrate to them that we have a plan. We're going to do better going forward. The council's postured and ready to provide more resources as they are identified along the way.
Lee County NAACP says the meeting was meant to give recommendations of their own following an independent audit into FMPD. They want to put an end to the heavy-handed nature of some officers they addressed in a civil rights complaint to the Department of Justice. They say they're here not to point fingers, but tell police they are willing to work together.
And it's important work, and it takes everybody.
This meeting is scheduled for next Monday. Fort Myers Police, since this morning, has refused to answer our calls regarding giving comment on this meeting. In Fort Myers, Levi Ismail, NBC.
On the Night Beat, is the Fort Myers Police Department making the grade? We told you earlier about a scathing audit revealing several shortcomings at FMPD. Wink News wanted to know, what do you think? Night Beat's Kasey talked to several community members.
The number of unsolved crimes is staggering, from detectives failing to document investigations consistently.
I do have some concerns, and I've never said that we didn't have challenges. We got challenges.
Some of the more high-profile cases are ZombieCon and the Club Blue shooting. There were potentially hundreds of witnesses, and yet no one is charged in those killings. Wink News wanted to know what the community thinks, and they stand behind their officers. Tanya Kola is the coordinator of Dunbar Neighborhood Watch. She's also planning a community vigil tomorrow night.
I think sometimes we read too much into certain things, and I think that we should give them an opportunity and a chance, because I know that they work really hard to make sure that we're safe in this community.
Business leaders say they believe Southwest Florida is relatively safe compared to other areas.
So crime rates here are going to be lower than a lot of the areas, and the quality of life is better. People move here for water, warmth, and way of life.
Still, there is clearly a need for improvement. Kasey Kushner, Wink News, now.
Research shows crime rates can directly impact property values. One study indicates that a 10% reduction in homicides would lead to an increase in home values the following year. Community members say they know change takes time, but they hope after this audit, the Fort Myers Police Department can clean house quickly and keep everybody safe.
Now, alarming allegations against some Fort Myers police officers. A new independent report out today claims they leaked search warrant information to drug dealers, and those officers received promotions. This is just one finding from the review of that department. Wink News reporter Michelle Kingston was there when the group revealed its findings today. She's live now with more on what's next. Michelle.
Well, they're calling for a lot of changes within the department. They're asking for additional staffing, more training, even reevaluating supervisors. A lack of officers to solve crimes and preferential treatment within the department were two main issues brought out in an investigation within the Fort Myers Police Department.
That cannot happen. That is something that needs to be addressed one way or the other.
The city paid the free group $150,000 to investigate and found there's a culture of failure and defeatism, integrity issues, and cliques that divide the officers.
The great majority, if not almost every single person we interviewed, said there was a cliquish system within the department. You either were in or you were out.
The Free Group interviewed 200 officers anonymously, detailing policies not being followed, evidence getting backlogged, murderers being allowed to walk the streets because cases go cold. The report mentions allegations that some officers even leaked information to drug dealers about search warrants, and those officers who may have leaked information were promoted. The company also interviewed some members of the public who say they want more police visibility on the streets, which is one of the programs new Police Chief Derek Diggs has already implemented, community engagement.
We have improved the safety of our citizens in our neighborhoods, and we will continue to do so.
Chief Diggs says he's also taken a lot of weapons off of the streets since he started with the department. He also says he's going to be putting his officers through a lot of new training this year. Live in Fort Myers, Michelle Kingston, Wink News Now.
So I want to get right in. A lot of people have been asking, what has taken you so long to read the report? People might say it doesn't show that you're as concerned about it maybe as you should be.
Right. We got the report announced Wednesday. I received it Wednesday. The way my schedule was lined up, it was just hard for me to stop everything and read it. I've been getting bits and pieces of it from people. This weekend I'll have plenty of time to drill down and get.
I mean, do you think that this should take precedence?
Well, it is an audit report, and it's going to have things in there that are going to take us time to digest and initiate. It's a priority, so let's get that clear, but it's not something that's going to happen overnight. So I'd rather be thorough with it. It's been a challenging week with regard to my time, and I think this weekend I'll have plenty of opportunity to get my mind around it.
Okay. Obviously, I mean, it said a lot in this report.
Yeah.
Were you surprised at all of everything that it found?
I tell you what I was surprised of is at the time that this report was issued, either just before the report or about the time it came out, is our chief announced that that he was going to put some officers on leave. I'm concerned about that, and that was something that it made my head turn.
And I mean, some of these officers have been there for quite some time. One of them is almost top brass there.
Yeah.
What concerns you about that these officers are on leave?
Well, I think we need to know, were they part of the subject of the audit reports, the news that's come forward? What's around all of that? I think that's important to know. When you have citizens who come from time to time and say to the council, I've been mistreated, I've been this, I've been that. We hear that sometimes, and we ask the city manager to look into these things. But it's hard to find the facts. It's hard that we say to people, help us understand your complaint. Ask city manager to look into it, and there just seems to never be anything of substance there. This report gives us the opportunity.
But do you think there's never any substance because, as some would say in the report, it was very cliquish? There's cliques inside, and they kind of try to cover up some things.
That begs the question, and that's what makes this so interesting and important to get in and find. We got to have the facts, and when the council, when assertions are made to the council, the first thing that we always want is, we're with you, we appreciate your concern, let's get the facts and let's begin to understand what we're dealing with so we can solve the problem.
I want to read something because you said about the officers on leave. I want to read you a quote from page 7 of this report. It says, interviewees reported instances in which officers allegedly leaked information to drug dealers regarding search warrants. It does not appear that these matters were ever addressed in the department. Even those accusations, as mayor, how does that make you feel?
Well,
leaks to drug dealers.
The first thing that I feel is anger. This is a professional operation. We have high integrity and high standards. Why aren't we executing in that way? So something like that will get my back up, and I promise you, it's gotten the council's back up and the city manager's back up. So now we're predisposed to say, let's get to the bottom of this.
But when it comes to counsel, you know, some people have asked, how did it get this bad?
Yeah.
And why did it take so long for an audit like this to come about?
I can assure you this. The council and myself are asking the same questions of senior leadership. Now we got a new city manager.
Mm-hmm.
To his credit, he has, like any good manager would, has said to the council, let's get a baseline audit. We're looking not only at the law enforcement department, we've looked at fire, we're looking at general employees, we're looking at across the spectrum, how can we be a better city? This is part and parcel to that. We've taken measures in the fire department to get a new chief. We're looking now at the report that has just come out for the law enforcement. And this is part of a reset, if you will. So council wants to know, I want to know, we have the same questions. Why so long? Why, when it was being represented to the council, for example, we're dealing with this, we've got this, we're using this, using that. What else was not shared with us during those years? And I'm going to say that let's talk about a 36, 48 month span of time.
I have to ask though, where does the buck ultimately stop? Is it you as mayor, or is it the city manager or the chief?
Well, you read the city charter. That'll answer that question for you. The city, the mayor, sets policy. As a matter of fact, when we have had the urge to get deeper involved in things, we have to resist because we're not, myself, the council, we don't run the city on a day-to-day basis. We have 2 employees, a city manager, city attorney. Our job is to hold them accountable. Unless we have information that suggests otherwise, that our city leadership is grossly negligent, making poor decisions.
And this never came up once before that you felt that you needed to step in?
Well, let's put it to date, until we got this, there wasn't any meaningful factual information that would lead the council to say, wait a minute, city manager, there's something right with you.
But did it ever make you think all the high-profile cases that were never able to get solved, sitting up, you know, in council, did it ever make you think, what is going on here? Why can't they solve these cases?
Yeah, well, it would come to mind, but honestly, that's everywhere. There's high-profile cases. There's cold cases in every law enforcement jurisdiction. It wouldn't appear, for example, to the mayor or the council that was extraordinary or unusual in any way. We certainly suffered some cutbacks during the recession where we cut back law enforcement, but we cut back everything. We cut back general employees, fire. Leadership in most areas were able to deal with that. It seems like that our police agency suffered a little more than others.
Well, yeah, and I want to talk about that because that was a big deal for a lot of cities, you know, to cut back. In 2008, obviously, they had the buyouts. You know, the report says a lot of experienced officers and supervisors retired, and they, you know, the people that replaced them weren't properly trained. Looking back, do you ever feel maybe you and council should have done more or made sure the police department did more when these buyouts happened?
Well, it's a hard thing to analyze. When you say do more, would that, you know, put us in a position of overstepping our authority under the charter?
So ultimately, the city manager ultimately that's where the buck stops when it comes to day-to-day operations.
I think with day-to-day operations, things like this where the police chief reports to the city manager, I think that's straightforward and clear. And you know, we're all guarded. My colleagues and I, we're all guarded that we're not promoting or, you know, supporting insubordination, pushing politics downstream that interfere with day-to-day working, and that's a delicate balance. I've been concerned. I've met over the past few years with, for example, with our legal team. I've asked them questions, but you know, there's nothing really that jumps out at you that says, "Wow, you know, this is an emergency. This is a crisis." In our day-to-day stuff.
I want to go back to the you know, the leaks to the drug dealers, the allegations of that. whose decision is it to bring in another agency to investigate if there's any criminal wrongdoing for those officers? Is that you? Is that the city manager, the chief?
Yeah. One way that this came forward, and that's a great question, is in this world of policy making and yet authority over city matters. In that process, I met with our city legal team, namely Grant Alley, and years back, and I said, you know, is there something we ought to be doing as a mayor and as a council? What are some options? And you know, we had a brainstorm, informal brainstorm. It was suggested that we consult with some outside authorities on ideas, and it came forward that, you know, the Department of Justice is available to help law enforcement agencies. You can hire outside companies. We end up hiring a Louis Free agency, for example, and they will come in and do an assessment, much like you would do a financial audit, which we do every year. It made sense to me. Over time, I suggested to Billy Mitchell and Saeed Kazemi, subsequent to Billy Mitchell, that why don't you think about having someone come in, just do a top-down, and let's do the whole city. Let's just don't focus on law enforcement. And ultimately, it evolved into that. I credit Saeed for listening to the idea. Now, that's all it was, an idea. So he had to go do the legwork. He had to call around who does this, who can do it well. So I think it's fair to say that in an informal sort of way, that concept came forward. Saeed grabbed hold of it, and today we have the results of not only the police audit, but we've got fire and general employee. We have our financial audit. All those things are available, available to council, to citizens to look and see. They're tools that help us do better. They're also tools that help us understand if things are going bad or if there's misbehaving and those kind of things. You look for that all the time in financial. We should be looking at it more in all aspects of city business.
Well, do you think anyone's going to bring in maybe the DOJ to investigate officers now?
Well, it depends on what the severity of the situation is. That's clearly what the expectation would be if continued judgments of the city leadership, especially the chief, would lead to that. So yes, I think we're going to be all wanting to know. And that's something that you're maybe open to suggesting after you read the fine details? Is that something that you would? Is that something that you would bring forward, the DOJ investigator, or is that more of a city manager, chief? When it comes to the DOJ? Well, I would say it's probably a joint effort. I think the council would expect, I would expect that we would have information come forward to the council. We would dissect that together with city management and come up with a decision as to what to do. It may follow a natural course. I don't know. I'm not a law enforcement expert, but I am keenly interested in getting the findings in this report addressed as quickly as possible so we understand how we need to go forward. There's another one that I want to read to you. Officers who were not trusted by other officers, witnesses, or outside agencies were nevertheless promoted and allowed to serve in positions wherein they had the ability to compromise sensitive investigations. Yeah. And I want to go back to the Andrew Faust case because I believe that's when something really started to change in the city. Do you ever think back, if our department was performing better, could that boy's killers have been caught and punished? Well, when you look at a report that asserts these kind of things, and that begs the question. And I think the answer is yes. We could have done better. We should have done better. When you hear these kinds of assertions made, you're saying to yourself that a total breakdown in senior leadership in the department. Trust obviously was a big deal. If we had information leaking, which this suggests, that's a huge problem. It is a huge problem and a huge disappointment. I think the council is ready to get on with this report and find out what needs to be done going forward. Because I mean, there's so many people out there whose loved ones are not here anymore, and they're probably sitting back thinking, if they could have just done their job well, we would have some justice. Well, let's don't think lightly of the perpetrator. Ultimately, this this blood lies on the hands of the person that did it. And I'm gonna fall short of laying that blame on law enforcement. You know, we want to do our best to stop things, and we support our law enforcement. We do not support the kind of assertions that have come forward in this report. We do not support that. And what our obligation is, once we know the information, is to move swiftly through it, solve the problem, and go deeper and find out just how bad it is. And I think that's what we got to make the focus. Right. Looking back over our shoulders and with 20/20 hindsight, woulda, coulda, shoulda kind of analysis doesn't serve much purpose. We're heartbroken for every loss of citizens. I said last night for hours in a wonderful, beautiful, emotional prayer vigil for those lost. That's not something that the council and myself figure on year in and year out. We're about making cities better and including safer. And when this happens, it's heartbreaking.
So now let's talk about the future. You know, we got through the stuff in the report that I want to bring up to you. In any way, is this kind of good that all of this just kind of came out, everyone knows about it? Do you see that as a way to move forward?
Well, I think rather than use the word good, I think the appropriate characterization is it is the expectation. We paid a lot of money for this report. We're going to take the report and set it on a shelf. We need information. The report is aimed at making us a better city. The results of how we solve issues in a report, that's good. That is good. And so in that sense, the report is going to do what it's supposed to do, give us knowledge, give us a way forward. And I can promise you the city manager, the council, myself, we want to get this right. And we get financial reports every year, financial audits every year, and those audits have been good reports. And we should probably do this more often. Is one thing, one of my takeaways, and I'm not sure you do this every year, but you know, probably every 5 years or so you want to check things out a little bit. This is an agency. Entities go through life cycles, and I think this report illustrates to us clearly we're at the low end of a life cycle with our law enforcement officer in the way of culture, the way of behavior, the favoritism that's illustrated there, possible leaks. Those are horrible things. We got to solve that.
So, you know, the recommendations, obviously, when you read through the report, it has a series of recommendations. Some of them are, you know, hiring more officers, hiring 2 deputy chiefs, a PIO. So from a council standpoint and from a budget standpoint, how is the city going to afford this moving forward? Where was the money going to come from to actually make these recommendations come to life?
Yeah, great question. A lot of the things that are suggested in here are already funded and underway. We were one of the first agencies, even in the Baker administration, to put and deploy body cams, and we're doing that more. We had a release just recently where more body cams are coming. We've got cameras in public places. They're paid for. We are going to budget for and implement new technology over a period of time. The city's growing. If I can step back a minute and look at the policy of the council and with the leadership of the city leadership in the way of economic development, we've emerged post-recession now, and we are going to have new discretionary revenues to help us solve these kinds of problems. So I'm confident. I was noticing some interviews where, you know, would you be willing to pay you know, extra taxes? I don't see a scenario where that's readily required to do. I think we can shepherd through this. We came through the Great Recession, and we did pretty good in some very challenging times financially. And I believe we're going to be fine. I think we'll find the money.
And you talked about growth. Do you think FMPD is going to be do you think FMPD is going to be able to handle the growth in this city?
Yeah, I do. We have excellent leadership in Derek Diggs. I credit the city manager for his selection of a very serious and measured in a law enforcement professional who's intent on solving this problem. He came from an environment where his problem there was much worse than ours. He's got special knowledge. He's making an impact already. I believe with the deployment of the latest and greatest technology, best practices, community policing, trust building, these are all critical issues, and he's dialed that in. I am confident that we will solve this, and it will be better, and we will be able to fund it, and we're going to be safer for it. Fort Myers is not less safe than other cities in this region or in this state or America for that matter. And we've just transitioned into new leadership in the city manager's office and new leadership in law enforcement. And I believe results are going to be coming forward.
Briefly talk to me, but in the report it says that officers respect Chief Diggs. He's changed stuff already. He is seems to be, to many people from the report, the guy to handle all of this. So tell me more about Chief Diggs and your confidence that he is the right person to do this.
Every day I grow in confidence. He's a man of not many words. He's a relentless worker. I have respected that he doesn't have time for a lot of things because he's busy. I felt guilty, I'll share this story, taking him away from his daily work to join other mayors and chiefs around the state to talk about violent crime. He did come away from that thanking me and said that he gleaned a lot from it, but in the meantime he wasn't back here working with his troops. He is intent on solving this, and I'm confident. I have a very high confidence level. I think the council has a high confidence level that he will get the job done. So our days forward are very promising, and we're going to hold him accountable. Again, Syed Kasemi is to be commended for going for a national search and handpicking a guy to lead us forward.
Okay, I think that is it. I just want to make sure there's nothing else. Okay. And that's a lot. Covered a lot.
I'm tired.
And I know this might be a tough question to answer, but is there anyone in your mind is there one person that's responsible for all this in your mind, do you think? Or do you think it's just been through the years with multiple people?
I would say it's an aggregate of missteps along the way that have been compounded by maybe not fully understanding the depth of the challenges that have come forward here. I'm particularly bothered by the notion, reality, that the city of Fort Myers law enforcement agency would not play well with other agencies. I don't understand that. It doesn't make sense to me. And I've heard people who've read the report say that that's one of the big things in the report. And I'm going to read that over this weekend.
Did you ever get the sense of that happening even when Chief Baker was in office?
I wondered about it, and here's why I wondered about it. There was evidence in the media, a letter that Baker, I recall, and I couldn't recite the letter for you, but it had a very uncooperative tone to it, to Steve Russell. And I remember at that time thinking, geez, that's not good. We ought to have a better working relationship. So there were things along the way that gave me pause, and then to have this come forward now and say that we weren't playing well with others, and I've heard that.
Looking back now, do you kind of wish you would have said something?
Yeah.
Back then.
Yeah, I think. Well, at the very least, I wish I would have said, hey, how's it going with our neighboring law enforcement officers? Are we doing good? Are we working with them? I mean, that would have been a good thing to do. And yet, we're busy. The council's busy doing its work. I'll say it again, unless we have really compelling reason to not doubt to not trust or have extreme doubt about city management, our city chief, police chief, we're going to go on about our business. And so I'm interested in learning more.
I wanted to ask you last question, anything that you in yourself, maybe, or maybe wanting to do moving forward as mayor, you know, of making sure it doesn't get this bad ever again?
Well, I think those measures have been taken. We have a new city manager. We have a new police chief. We're deploying new technology. And we've been on this for several years now. It's not just now evolving. And we got a lot more to do. I'm comfortable with that. I think we're going to be very assertive. I think we're going to have a lot of progress made. In the meantime, whatever fallout we have from this report, we're going to solve that. We're going to get to the bottom of it, make sure this doesn't happen again. So if there's any responsibility I feel with the council is, we're going to say to the city manager, solve this and give us prima facie evidence that it's solved. Yeah. I think probably it's going to make us be a little less willing to accept that everything is okay, and that we ought to be stepping up. And you say oh, things are okay. And in what way are they okay? You know, let's begin to question things a little more. Right. So we're gonna emerge out of this stronger, and I'm confident. I'm glad we did it. It was a good idea when it was born a few years ago. Saeed executed on it. The council's here today. They're not happy about this. We don't know it fully yet, but we're going to find out.
Okay. All right, Mayor. Thank you very much. I appreciate it. Thank you.